Hello, everybody. My name is Guy Rubin. I'm the CEO of Ebsta. Today, we're going to be going through all of the insights from the 2024 B2B benchmark report. Don't worry about taking screenshots. Obviously, you're welcome to, but I'm going to be sharing a QR code at the end of the presentation where you're going to be able to download the whole report and all of the insights for yourself to digest. So let me start by introducing myself. My name is Guy Rubin. I'm the CEO of Ebsta. Ebsta is a AI-first guided selling and revenue intelligence platform. We live in a world now where we've all invested lots of money and time in lots of different technologies for our sales teams, and still 4 out of 5 reps are missing quota. Here at Ebsta, we guarantee to double the number of reps hitting quota by understanding what your top performers are doing at every stage of your sales cycles and using that to prompt your B and C players inside Salesforce, inside HubSpot. Enough about me. Let me bring the presentation up and see if we can get going. So here we are. So hopefully you can now all see my screen. So as well as being the CEO of Ebsta, I'm also the Pavilion CEO Ambassador. So those of you that are CEOs of businesses and are yet to be part of the CEO community within Pavilion, please reach out. I'd love to share with you all of the benefits and values of getting of joining the CEO community within Pavilion. And if you have a CEO that isn't a member yet, again, feel free to introduce them to me, and I'm happy to have that chat with them. So today we're going to be talking about the insights from the B2B benchmark report. As I mentioned, we analysed over $54 billion worth of pipeline over the last 12 months. But before I talk about the numbers from this year's report, I just want to start by setting some context as to where we've come from. So a year ago, we were all looking quite positively towards the numbers. So the numbers from the 2023 report suggested that win rates were going up, sales cycles were reducing, and average deal values were also increasing. However, over 2/3 of our reps were still missing quota at 73%, and the delta between our top performers and our average performers had grown from 4x the previous year to 6x in this year. We also saw over 1/3 of deals were slipping from their anticipated close date. So there were some early signals that things weren't moving in the right direction. So in the last 12 months, we've analysed over 4.2 million opportunities, representing $54 billion worth of pipeline. And for the very first time this year, the report includes analysis of over 1 million hours of sales calls and conversations. So when we look at the 2024 data, unfortunately, the markets have become a lot more challenging over the last 12 months. So we've seen win rates drop, deal values go down, and sales cycles elongate. We see that we have 69% of reps now missing quota, and the delta between those top performers and average performers has grown even further now to nearly 9x. And we can see nearly half of deals are slipping past their anticipated close dates. So if we dive into those numbers in a bit more detail, those eagle-eyed of you will notice that the quota attainment had actually gone down, or the number of reps missing quota had gone down from 73 to 69%. But as we look at the data further, we can see that actually what happened is we reduced our sales reps quota. So if we hadn't seen the quota attainment reduction in place, the number of reps missing quota would have gone up to 79%, not down. We can also see that this delta between those top performers and average performers has gone so large now that our top performers we've got just 17% of reps generating over 80% of our revenue. To answer one of the questions in the, yes, Lee's answered that question for you, great. So as I was saying, we're now in a world where our top performers can almost hold the business to ransom with just 17% of reps generating over 80% of our revenue. We saw just 15% of sales teams had over half of the sales reps generating 80% or more of quota. And we also saw a massive amount of churn in the number of sales reps that have left our businesses. So the churn went from 1 in 5 to 1 in 3, which is a huge step. And we seem to be churning out the sales reps that aren't hitting quota a lot faster than we ever have before. And then finally, when we look at the pipe that we were generating, one of the interesting points is that we're now getting busier than we ever were before. So pipeline coverage has actually jumped by 23%. So the number of deals that are coming through that are entering the pipeline has grown dramatically. But we all know that when deals start to slip, it has a material impact on win rates. And so while we're busier and we're working on more opportunities, actually, when deals start to slip, the win rates drop, and we're not actually seeing the more pipeline lead to more opportunities winning. And to understand the impact of slippage, once deals slip by more than 8 weeks on average, we're seeing that the win rates drop by 2/3. So which of these key stats should we be focusing our energies on? And you won't be surprised to hear that I believe it's all about this middle data point here. We need to find ways of reducing the delta between our top performers and our B and C players and helping them all to win a lot more. So how do we do this? Well, in the old world, it really didn't matter, because if it cost 5 to achieve 1, we could just spend 10 to achieve 2. But we don't live in the old world anymore, so we need to get a lot more creative, and we can't have anybody who's not really focused on doing the very best they can at every stage of the sales cycle. And this is the only way we're going to achieve more with less. So let's jump into what are those attributes of the top performers at each stage of the sales cycle. To break it down, I've tried to turn it into break it through all the different stages of a sales process. Obviously, you're all going to have slightly different sales processes out there, but I've broken it into kind of 5 key stages. So let's dive into the data. So when we think about top of the funnel and prospecting, some really interesting data points looking at the data here. First of all, it's worth noting the top performers are twice as likely to self-source their own opportunities. We also know that not all leads are equal, and you can see really nicely in this graphic that leads that have come, for example, from partners only represent about 10% of our pipeline, but are generating nearly 1/3 of our revenue. So understanding which sources are giving you the best outcomes is really important. We also need to understand which personas we should be engaging with. So the B and C players will talk to anybody who fills in a form, but the top performers are very laser focused on only talking to the relevant stakeholders, really getting the right engagement with the right personas. Now, one of the really interesting takeaways from this slide is looking at the impact the CFO is now having on the sales cycle. And I encourage all of you to try and understand at what stage are your sales team engaging with that CFO, because I'd put money on the fact that most of us are engaging with the CFO far too late in the sales cycle. So if you can get the CFO involved before you're presenting back the solution, you're much more likely to understand what their objections might be or what they're trying to achieve, and help them and build that into the business case, and much more likely to get sign-off. So one of the things that we do at Ebsta differently is measure engagement. So we all know that relationships drive revenue in B2B sales, but how important are those relationships and the engagement and the strength of those relationships? You can see on this heat graph, the top performers are consistently engaging with all of their stakeholders much more than the B and C players. Now, that's not because the B and C players don't want to engage with the right personas. The problem is that those personas don't see them as expert advisors. They see them as annoying salespeople. So when the top performers are engaging with these personas, they are having interesting conversations with the customer and helping to educate them as to why the solution that you solve is a high priority for the business, instead of just showing them how the buttons work. And so when the top performers pick up the phone again and want to re-engage with those stakeholders, because they added value in the last time they engaged, the buyers are much more likely to want to engage with them. And we see that through the levels of engagement within the different personas. Now, it's also worth noting that when the B and C players do achieve high levels of engagement, their win rates are very similar to the top performers. Now, as we work through the rest of the funnel, we start thinking about qualifying the customers. Now, once again, we've all spent a lot of time and energy trying to teach our sales teams how to qualify better. The problem is we've also made it their responsibility to then log that activity in the system of record. And so 3 months after everyone's been trained on how to use Medic or Medpick or Bant or Spiced, guess what? No one's bothering to fill in the data as much as they should. And frankly, we've got to stop trying to convince the salespeople to do things that the AI can do better than they can. So understanding that the AI can pick up the call recordings and also populate things like Medic or Medpick inside Salesforce for you means that we can focus our energies on training the salespeople on how to qualify better. And if we can gamify it and give it a score, then every time they get off a qualification call and they've done their discovery, they're hoping their score is going to be higher and higher. And all of a sudden, they're focused on how they get that score as high as possible by asking the right questions rather than focusing on how they do the admin, which frankly, the AI can do a whole lot better than they can. And with that in mind, this is a screenshot of how we do it inside Salesforce. So on every opportunity record, you can see those call recordings, and we auto populate whatever your methodology is and score how well the customer's been qualified. Now, we talk about MEDDPICC adoption. We know that the impact of MEDDPICC adoption on win rates is material. Frankly, it doesn't matter which methodology you're using, but understanding how it impacts your win rates is really important. And if you understand it and can show it to the sales team, suddenly they'll understand why you've been asking them to do it all that time. And here's a great example. This was a software business in the US, which had, and their win rates were at 37% when they used a qualification methodology, but down at just 12% when they didn't. So knowing what percentage of your opportunities are being qualified correctly is going to help you to work towards that number being higher and higher. Now, we all know that we're losing nearly 2/3 of opportunities due to indecision, but that number is not equal across our sales teams. The top performers have a very different approach to the way that they speak to the customers. So this information has been gathered from that button that people push to tick the box as to why did we lose that deal. And what we see is that the B and C players within our teams are constantly thinking about that they closed off deals because there wasn't a budget, or it wasn't a high enough priority, or one of the competitors got there before we did. But the top performers know how to deal with those objections. They're much better at explaining to the customer, well, I understand you don't have a budget, but look at the impact we can have on your business. This is why this project should be a high enough priority for us to go and find budget together. And so the only reason that the top performers are closing opportunities off as lost, or more often than not, is due to the lack of the features that the customer actually requires, or maybe the customer's too small to get the real ROI on this opportunity. So really understanding why we're losing those opportunities is key, and you'll see there's a big delta between those top performers as to why they close off opportunities as lost versus everybody else. I'll also mention that one of the things we see consistently is that the top performers are closing about 30% of their opportunities as lost at the discovery stage. So one of the mistakes we make, we report a lot on level of coverage each rep needs to hit quota. And sometimes you'll see that the top performer's level of coverage required to hit quota is much, much lower than the average performer. And sometimes we forget that when we see that their pipeline's not as big as everybody else's, but they're the ones that consistently hit the number. So rather than, so encouraging your team to close deals off as lost if they're not real will ultimately lead to a better number at the end of the quarter. Okay, so I mentioned at the beginning that we also analysed over 1 million hours of sales calls, trying to understand what the differences are between those average performers and top performers. And the key we saw, and effectively what you're looking at on this graphic is everything above the line speeds up the sales process and everything below the line slows it down. And what we can see here is that the top performers are much more likely to talk about ROI and business case much earlier in the sales cycle than the rest of the sales team. And so the B and C players end up talking about ROI at a much later stage when they're trying to negotiate the deal, when in fact the decision's already been made not to go ahead because they didn't really understand the impact and the ROI. This graphic here is trying to understand the difference between close won and lost deals. And the key takeaway here is trying to understand when we win opportunities, the chances are we've engaged with the entire buying committee. So if you've only engaged with 3 stakeholders and the buying committee is 9, the chances are your competitors are talking to the other 6. So knowing that is absolutely key, so that we know who the buying committee are and we're engaging with them as early in the sales process as we possibly can. One of the other takeaways from this graphic is the time in stage. So the size of the bar dictates the time we're spending in stage. And we know that when we have momentum on an opportunity, we're much more likely to win it. So for example, if we haven't booked the next meeting in the diary within 7 days of the last meeting, it doesn't need to take place, but if it hasn't been booked within 7 days, the win rates drop by nearly 2/3. So lots of interesting insights on this slide. Now, we speak a lot about engagement. So one of the things we've done here at Ebsta is to quantify what engagement is. So we score every relationship your business has out of 100. And we don't rely just on what's in Salesforce. We go and pick up the data from your mailboxes, your calendars, and your phone systems, really to understand how much momentum and engagement you have with every stakeholder involved in every sales process and at every customer. And of course, a meeting's worth more than a call, and a call that lasts 10 minutes isn't worth as much as a call worth an hour. And inbound activity is worth a lot more than outbound. Now, once we know that in this case, this was a healthcare business also based in the States, once we know the level of engagement required to achieve a close one opportunity, it can be a data point we can lean into and encourage the sales team to build stronger relationships with the right stakeholders. The other thing we can do with that data point is help the sales team to understand which opportunities we have closing perhaps in the next 30 days, which have good levels of engagement, but not great. Moving deals up from the very low levels of engagement to really high is quite a big lift. But actually, if you've got deals with a good level of engagement, in this case, this customer, the healthcare business I just mentioned, they had 58 opportunities planning to close in the next 30 days that had a good level of engagement, 60 to 80, but not great, above 80. So moving those deals up one notch is not a huge lift, but it has a huge impact on win rates. So if you're in those late stages of those complex sales processes and you're already multi-threaded, think about leaning in more. Find ways of getting that engagement even higher at those late stages, and you'll win a lot more than you have in the past. And then finally, we talk about slippage. We all know that time kills all deals, but it's really important to understand by how much. So in this case, this was a software business, a large software business in the States. And when we did the analysis, when deals slipped by more than 12 weeks, their win rate was down at 0. Well, guess what? They still had a lot of opportunities they were still investing time in that had slipped by more than 12 weeks. So knowing the impact of slippage on win rates is really important to help the sales team to close those deals off as lost and work on something more productive. So a lot of data there to try and digest in a very short amount of time. But a couple of key takeaways about the behaviors we see of those top performers. First of all, the top performers are over 3 times more likely to have completed the qualification methodology as part of the sales cycle, and not just in the initial discovery stage. They're consistently going back to the qualification and asking those questions again and again all the way through the sales process. Top performers are also 5 times more likely to have really good, high levels of engagement with the C-suite. They're twice as likely to self-source their own opportunities and nearly 5 times more likely to have that economic buyers, including the CFO, engaged before the solution is presented back to the customer. They're 3 times less likely to lose an opportunity to indecision, but they're 3 times more likely to close lost opportunities at that discovery stage. Much more bullish at closing deals off that aren't real. And finally, 4 times more likely to update their opportunities every single week, keeping that momentum going. So to finish off, if you want to replicate your top performers' behaviors, first of all, you need to understand what that behavior is. And the challenge we see with this data is that the information you've got in CRM, more often than not, is not consistent enough. So the first thing we do here at Ebsta is fix the data associated to opportunities that closed won and lost in the past. Now, if you can get that data clean, now you can start building those benchmarks and understanding what good looks like, how big the buying committee is, which personas are giving you the best outcomes, and how much engagement is required to achieve a win. Be ruthless about your qualification, okay? Or get the rest of your sales team. I know your top performers are already ruthless, but get everybody being ruthless about the way they qualify those opportunities. Almost set a target of closing off a certain percentage of deals as lost at that stage. And we've seen 30% is the right number for most businesses. Now, we know that sales reps have got a limited capacity for learning. And so when it comes to coaching, be conscious of not coaching them on things that the AI can do better than they can. So things like logging their activity, creating contacts, keeping those contacts up to date, logging their medic inside Salesforce, all of that the AI can do better than they can. Focus on coaching your sales reps on objection handling, on presenting themselves as that expert advisor, on helping reach a consensus with the buying committee, rather than just showing them how the buttons work. And being more multi-threaded absolutely matters. So making sure you've got all of these insights is absolutely key. Wow, I can't believe we got through it in the 20 minutes. So I hope you enjoyed the content here. If you'd like to digest this information in your own time, you can scan the QR code on the page. And that'll lead you to a page where you can actually download the whole report and all of the insights I've gone through today. And I can see the last question that came up is, can you get the deck? Yeah, scan the QR code and you'll get all of the insights we've gone through. So I hope that's useful to you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the session. And I look forward to seeing you at another Pavilion event very soon.